are stubborn things. See, whatever our wishes, our inclinations, or the dictums of our passions, they cannot alter the state of facts and evidence. You see, the law, on the one hand, is inexorable to the cries and lamentations of the prisoners, but on the other hand, it is deaf as an adder to the clamors of the populace. Gentlemen of the jury, I submit to your candor and justice the prisoners and their cause.
Hello, history friends, and welcome back to my channel, Historical USA. I'm your host, historian Lisa Weekland, and here we discuss the people, places, and events that made America. Now, we are far from over with the Boston Massacre saga. In this episode, we are digging into the trials of the Boston Massacre. And in case you missed my other episodes on the Boston Massacre, let's do a little bit of a recap here. So March 5th, 1770, a night that would ignite the flames of revolution in America. The Boston Massacre, a tragic confrontation between British soldiers and American colonists. It would leave 5 civilians dead and spark a legal battle that would test the very foundations of justice in the American colonies. Join me as we delve into the historical significance of the Boston Massacre trials and their impact on American law. Now, on that fateful night, Private Hugh White stood guard outside the Custom House in Boston. Tensions had been brewing for years as British soldiers occupied the city, enforcing some pretty unpopular laws. Now, as the crowd grew hostile, calling for these soldiers to fire, chaos erupted. In a moment of panic, the soldiers did just that and fired into the crowd, killing 5 men. In the aftermath, the Lieutenant Governor Thomas Hutchinson faced immense political pressure to maintain order. He famously declared that night, quote, "The law shall have its course. I will live and die by the law." Now, this statement set the stage for a landmark legal battle that would unfold in the courts of Massachusetts. There would be 2 separate trials, actually, not one. The trial of Captain Thomas Preston and the trial of the 8 soldiers involved would become a pivotal moment in colonial history. The Superior Court of Judicature, the highest court in Massachusetts, presided over these 2 cases. For the first time, the phrase reasonable doubt was introduced in a courtroom, setting a precedent for future legal proceedings. Now, as English subjects, they were entitled to a fair trial by jury and a competent defense counseled, which was not an easy task. See, loyalists in the city wanted the soldiers pardoned, while patriots wanted the soldiers convicted. Traditionally, the Justice of the Supreme Court would preside over a case such as this. However, with the Chief Justice also serving as the Lieutenant Governor, Thomas Hutchinson recused himself and declined to preside over the trials. That left Justice Benjamin Lind of Salem, Massachusetts, and he would become the acting Chief Justice. Lind, however, was known to be a rather nervous man and actually tried to resign from his position twice before the trials were even set to begin. Now, in the weeks after the massacre, Attorney General Jonathan Sewell would put together the indictments. Hutchinson was really pushing Lind to postpone the trials as long as possible. Hutchinson's thinking, or more Hutchinson's hope, was that maybe the unrest in Boston would settle down by the time of the trials. Meanwhile, Attorney General Sewell at one point declined to press any charges against the troop. See, no one wanted to touch this case with a 10-foot pole. But justice would prevail and the trials would have to be played out. Now, the legal teams were a mix of loyalists and patriots. The prosecution consisted of the patriot Robert Treat Paine, who would also be a future signer of the Declaration of Independence, and the staunch loyalist and Solicitor General of Massachusetts, Samuel Quincy, who would flee to London after the signing of the Declaration of Independence. Now, for the defense, the most notable person on the defensive team would be John Adams. Now, Adams was a patriot. He was not a member of the Sons of Liberty, contrary to popular belief. But at the time, he was the top attorney in Boston, and as history will play out, would become a representative of the Continental Congress, a signer of the Declaration of Independence, a commissioner to France during the Revolution, and he would become the first vice president and the second president of the United States. Talk about a resume. On his team was also Robert Ashmody, Jr., who was a loyalist and served as the judge of the Vice Admiralty Court. Now, he said he would take on the role of attorney for Captain Preston, but only if John Adams could join as co-counsel, which he did. Ashmody, like Sam Quincy, left Boston as soon as the ink was dry on the Declaration of Independence, and he would pass away in London in 1788. Also on the defensive team was Josiah Quincy Jr., a passionate patriot and the younger brother of the prosecution, Samuel Quincy. Now, the Quincy family, like many families during the Revolution, was a house deeply divided. Josiah worked hard for the Patriots, but would pass away during a diplomatic mission to England in 1775. Also on the defense for the soldiers would be Sampson Salter Blowers, a loyalist who was later exiled during the Revolution and became the Chief Justice of Nova Scotia, actually. The first to go to trial would be Captain Thomas Preston, the officer in charge that faithful night. His trial would begin October 24th, 1770. He had been in jail for several months since the massacre. His lawyers had to show that he did not give the order to fire, and the prosecution needed to show that he was responsible for the death of those 5 men. The jury was composed largely of loyalists, which raised a lot of eyebrows among the patriot crowd. With only 2 jurors actually residents of Boston, the odds seem stacked in Preston's favor. The prosecution's case relied on eyewitness accounts. William Watt would testify about the chaos in the streets, claiming without a doubt that he heard Preston yell to his men to fire. Daniel Khalif, another witness, identified Preston as the officer who gave the order, painting a picture of a man eager for violence.
I heard Captain Preston plain as day. "Damn your bloods," he said. "You won't treat me this way." Then he told the soldiers to fire.
In stark contrast, the defense presented witnesses who painted a different picture. John Frost and Benjamin Lee testified that Preston had no intention of firing, emphasizing the confusion and hostility that surrounded the soldiers that night. Richard Palms testified, quote, "I saw Captain Preston at the head of 7 or 8 soldiers at the custom house drawn up, their gun breasts high and bayonets fixed. I saw something resembling snow or ice strike the grenadier on the captain's right. The soldier instantly stepped 1 foot back and fired the first gun. After the gun went off, I heard the word fire. I don't know who gave the word fire. The trial lasted 5 days, filled with heated arguments and passionate testimonies. However, due to legal restrictions, Captain Preston himself could not testify. The jury returned a verdict when court opened at 8 a.m. on October 30th, 1770.
On the charge of murder, we, the jury, find the accused, Captain Thomas Preston, not guilty.
Now, the other soldiers, White, Hartigan, Kilroy, and others, actually petitioned to be tried alongside Captain Preston, but was denied. They faced 5 charges of murder. Now, attorney Samuel Quincy described the incident as, quote, the most melancholy event that has yet taken place on the continent of America, end quote. The jury, notably comprised of individuals from outside of Boston, was taken with determining whether the soldiers acted in self-defense or with malice. A guilty verdict would lead to the death penalty, while a manslaughter conviction might allow some wiggle room for the benefit of clergy. The prosecution built its case on the soldiers' alleged animosity toward the townspeople. Witness Samuel Hemingway testified about soldier Kilroy's threatening remarks, indicating a premeditated intent to harm the colonists. The defense, led by Josiah Quincy, argued that the soldiers should be judged solely on the evidence presented in court. Dr. John Jeffries provided testimony regarding victim Patrick Carr, who expressed no malice toward his shooter, suggesting that he was shot in self-defense. Despite the attempts to dismiss Carr's hearsay testimony, John Adams, closing for the defense, emphasized the importance of acquitting the innocent over convicting the guilty. The jury was instructed by Justice Peter Oliver to declare innocence if there was any reasonable doubt.
On the charge of murder, we, the jury, find the accused John Carroll, James Hartigan, Matthew Kilroy, William Macaulay, Hugh Montgomery, William Warren, William Waynes, and Hugh White not guilty.
Well, actually, it didn't happen quite like that. On December 5th, 1770, the jury acquitted 6 soldiers. Soldier Kilroy was found guilty of manslaughter for the death of Samuel Gray, while Montgomery was convicted for the killing of Crispus Attucks. The trial concluded quietly, but the public sentiment in Boston shifted. Samuel Adams, under the pseudonym Vindex, continued to write about the soldiers, ensuring the memory of the massacre endured. On December 14th, Kilroy and Montgomery faced the death penalty, but sought the benefit of clergy, a medieval legal provision allowing clergymen to escape execution. Now, to receive the benefit, they had only to prove they could read Psalms 51, verse 1, otherwise known as the neck verse, and it reads as follows: "Have mercy upon me, O God, according to thy loving kindness, according unto the multitude of thy tender mercies, blot out my transgressions." Both soldiers were branded with an M for murder on their hand by Suffolk County Sheriff Stephen Greenfield, preventing them from claiming the benefit again. Captain Preston left Boston for Castle Williams and eventually returned to England. The soldiers would return to the 29th Regiment, which had left Boston following the massacre. John Adams reflected on the trial, asserting that a death sentence for the soldiers would have stained the nation's honor, writing, quote, "I have reason to remember that fateful night. The part I took in defense of Captain Preston and the soldiers procured me anxiety. It was, however, one of the most gallant, generous, manly, and disinterested actions of my whole life, and one of the best pieces of service I ever rendered my country. Judgment of death against those soldiers would have been as foul a stain upon this country as the execution of the Quakers or witches anciently. As the evidence was, the verdict of the jury was exactly right." Thank you guys so much for watching this episode. If you enjoyed, please give this video a thumbs up. That really helps me in the algorithm. Also, leave a comment. What are your thoughts below? And make sure you subscribe and ring that bell so you will be notified anytime I post a historical video just like this. Thank you guys so much, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.